Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for another poetry discussion, the latest poetry discussion to come to us both from Robert Frost, as well as the collection New Hampshire, from, of course, Robert Frost. This poem is titled The Axe-Helve, and we have here not only a long story poem, but we also have something like the bro code, the man code. Is this published in 1917? Is this the earliest trace in literature of the bro code? I can't be sure. But we have it here nonetheless. And the poem, The Axe-Helve, reads as such. I've known ere now an interfering branch of alder catch my lifted axe behind me. But that was in the woods, to hold my hand from striking at another alder's roots. And that was, as I say, an alder branch. This was a man, Baptiste, who stole one day behind me in the snow in my own yard, where I was working at the chopping block, and cutting nothing not cut down already. He caught my axe expertly on the rise, when all my strength put forth was in his favor, held it a moment where it was to calm me, then took it from me, and I let him take it. I didn't know him well enough to know what it was all about. There might have been something he had in mind to say to a bad neighbor. He might prefer to say to him disarmed. But all he had to tell me, in French English, was what he thought of, not me, but my axe, me only as I took my axe to heart. It was the bad Axe-Helve someone had sold me. Made on machine, he said, plowing the grain with a thick thumbnail to show how it ran, across the handle's long-drawn serpentine, like two strokes across a dollar sign. You give her one good crack, she snap right off. Den where's your axe head fly? Flying through the air. Admitted, and yet, what was that to him? Come on to my house. I put you on in what's last a while. Good hickory, what's good crooked. And second groat, I cut myself, tough. Something to sell? That wasn't how it sounded. Den, when you say you come, it's cost you nothing, tonight? As well tonight as any night. Beyond an overwarmth of kitchen stove, my welcome differed from no other welcome. Baptiste knew best why I was there. I was. So long as he would leave enough unsaid, I shouldn't mind his being overjoyed, if overjoyed he was, at having got me where I must judge if what he knew about an axe, that not everybody else knew, was to count for nothing in the same measure of a neighbor. Hard if, though cast away your life with Yankees, a Frenchman couldn't get his human rating. Mrs. Baptiste came in and rocked a chair that had as many motions as the world, one back and forward, in and out of shadow. That got her nowhere. One more gradual sideways, that would have her on the stove. In time, had she not realized her danger and caught herself up bodily, chair and all, and set herself back where she started from. She ain't speak too much English. That's too bad. I was afraid, in brightening first on me, then on Baptiste, as if she understood what passed between us. She was only feigning. Baptiste was anxious for her, but no more than for himself. So placed she could hope to keep his bargain of the morning with me, in time to keep me from suspecting him of really having meant to keep it. Needlessly soon, he had his Axe-Helves out, a quiver full to choose from, since he wished me to have the best he had, or had to spare. Not for me to ask which, when what he took had beauties he had to point me out at length, to ensure their not being wasted on me. He liked to have it slender as a whipstock, free from the last knot, equal to the strain of bending like a sword across the knee. He showed me that the lines of the good helve were native to the grain, before the knife expressed them, and its curves were no false curves put on it from without. And there its strength lay for the hard work. He chafed its long white body from end to end with his rough hand shut round it. He tried it at the eye-hole and in the axe head. Han, he mused. Don't need much taken down. Baptiste knew how to make a short jab long, for the love of it, and yet not waste time either. Do you know what he talked about was knowledge? Baptiste, on his defense about the children he kept from school, or did his best to keep whatever school the children and our doubts of laid-on education had to do with the curves of his Axe-Helves and his having used these unscrupulously to bring me to see for once the inside of his house. Was I desired in friendship, partly as someone to leave it to, whether the right to hold such doubts of education should depend upon the education of those who held them? But now he brushed the shavings from his knee, and he stood with the axe there on its horse's hoof, erect, but not without its waves, as when the snake stood up for evil in the garden, top-heavy, with a heaviness in his short, thick hand, made light of steel blue, chin drawn down, and in a French touch that Baptiste drew back and squinted at it, pleased. See how she's cocked her head? Now, obviously, we could make all there is to make do about inviting another man over to see your helve, about running his thick hand across it, about the friendship necessary to bring another man into your house in order to see your Axe-Helves, about that last line there, see how she's cocked her head. We can make something about all that if we wanted to. If we were in that state of mind, we could. It's there to be made. It's not what I want to do. This was published in 1917 when Frost was 43. Frost was born in 1874. This is a person who is definitely, if he did not know this work himself, was from the world where the work such as chopping wood in order to keep warm was necessary. And it's crazy how very shortly after Frost's time, everything was so much easier, so much simpler. Imagine you go to work all day. Probably your work is something more physically challenging than your actual job today. And then you got to go out and chop wood in order to keep warm. Not a whole lot of energy left for reading after that day. Not a whole lot of energy left for the creative arts. Not a whole lot left for your YouTubing. But I want to talk about now a little bit. I've known ere now and then an interfering branch of alder catch my lifted axe behind me, but that was in the woods to hold my hand from striking another alder's roots. And that was, as I say, an alder branch. Alder. So I think what we have here is we have a word doing a lot of work. Alder, as the name, means older, right? Alder, older. sort of an obvious thing there, but an elder, right? Older elder, when we're talking about it like that. Alderman. One of the common places that you hear the word alder is an alderman. This is sort of like a city councilman, sort of like an elder in the community, someone who is there to speak for a community. And then alder is also a wood, a type of wood. Obviously here, what is literally being pointed to, alder wood, is what, if you Google it, what will come up is that it is the softest of the hard woods. So if we kind of think of all these things together, alderman, alderwood, especially when we have Baptiste coming in and plucking the axe in the way that an alder wood had, now it's held by an alder man. So if we think of alder people in the same way that we think of alder wood, the softest of the hard people, that hard man, that hardened, laborious man, that man hardened by labor. What would be the softest version of that? Perhaps the softest version of that is the softest version of a hard man is someone who has let his work harden him, but is still willing to teach someone else a thing or two. Still soft enough to allow that bent to his personality, much in the way that Baptiste seems to be doing here. And we know that Baptiste, not just through physical description, is an intimidating person, but we also have the little bit of commentary from the speaker himself. He let Baptiste take the axe. Why? If a man comes up behind you and puts his hand on the only weapon you've got, that is not an unscary thing. This is, in this world, something akin to walking up on a guy that's got open carry and putting your hand on the gun handle. Right? Pretty scary thing to do. And our speaker, who's not an untough guy himself, not a soft guy, just sort of seems to be weaving through life as opposed to having a direct shot. Our speaker lets him take it. Our speaker scared as hell of Baptiste. So what do we have here in this interaction? I want to cut to the latter part of the poem. Needlessly soon he had his axe-helves out, a quiver full to choose from, since he wished me to have the best he had, or the best he had to spare. Not for me to ask which, when what he took had beauties he had to point me out at length, to ensure their not being wasted on me. So, this is bro code. This is the man code. Part of the man code. Part of the man code is this. You help children all the time. A child needs help, you help the child. A woman needs help, a grown woman needs help, you help that woman if you can. Right? It's in literature. Go through and look. Go through and look. This isn't me talking out of my ass. But another man, children, you help all the time. Children, you help indiscriminately. Women, you help a woman if you can. Don't put yourself at odds for another adult. Don't ruin your life for a woman for whom there should be someone else to ruin their life, right? So if a woman is in that much distress, surely she has a father, surely she has a brother, surely she has a husband, something like that. Not me. This is chivalry. This is bro code. This goes way back. This is all throughout literature. You can go and look for yourself. 2 Mules for Sister Sarah. I suggest starting there. Children, you help indiscriminately. Women, you help if you can. Another man, you only help another man if he's willing to help himself. You only help another man if he's willing to help himself. Our speaker at the beginning of this poem is working like hell. He is not the most experienced. He is seemingly having a rough go of things, but he's working like hell. Working so hard, in fact, that he seems to think that he's making himself out to be a bad neighbor. I don't know if it's ever said in here, but it makes me question the hour at which he's chopping this wood. So Baptiste comes out, sneaks up on him, puts his hand on the weapon, says, "Hey, I got something for you. Come to my house. I want to show you my shafts," right? When he does, he ends up giving him and working on, while he's there, if you caught that, he's shaving the handle down still, the helve down still. Baptiste sees our speaker working very hard, very diligently, and knows this is another man who's working to help himself. I can step in, provide one thing, and completely make this man's job completely easier. All it costs me to make a real difference in this man's life, all it costs me to make a real difference in this man's life, one evening, one lecture, one Axe-Helve. And the fact, so this is sort of meta, the fact that our speaker is writing a poem about it, the fact that our speaker can recount this entire event, the fact that our speaker is able to remember all of the things that Baptiste says to him about this, lets the reader know Baptiste was correct. Not only is Baptiste the able man, the capable man, the competent man, the intimidator, but he was correct. He was correct in his assessment that our speaker, as wayward as he might seem to be at the beginning of this poem, has been given some nugget of knowledge, how you want to cut an Axe-Helve, how you want that Axe-Helve to be conditioned, and that there is a good conditioning that you can look for even when you're buying a mass-produced Axe-Helve. All of these things that Baptiste passes on are things to make a man's work easier. They are little bits of knowledge that might add up, not just to the day's cutting being done sooner, but what happens when a man's day's work is done earlier. He can start on the next day's work. He can get ahead. This snowballs into something bigger, into something more serious, into something which is appreciable over a large amount of time. And it's like, have you ever seen Gran Torino? The neighbor breaks into Clint Eastwood, two Clint Eastwood movies in a single video. Leave It to Robert Frost, right? Two Mules for Sister Sarah and Gran Torino. The neighbor breaks in and gets caught, almost gets killed, so the family makes him go back and work for him. It makes the neighbor kid go back and work for the Clint Eastwood character. Don't remember the name of the characters. When he's there, he is marveling at all of Clint Eastwood's tools. And he says, "How did you afford all this?" And Clint Eastwood makes the point, you don't afford it all at once. You need a hammer, you go buy a hammer. You need a screwdriver, you go buy a screwdriver. You do this, you bit in piece all of this knowledge, all of this work a day type of ability. Pretty soon, you've collected enough to get by. After that, you've collected enough to be great. After that, you've collected enough to pass something on. That is what Baptiste is doing in this poem, is passing something on. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. I hope to have you back for the next poetry discussion we have, for the next poetry discussion in the New Hampshire playlist here on the channel, for the next Robert Frost, for the next poetry review, for the next short story discussion, for the next short story review, for the next novel read-along, for the next book review. Whatever it is that I'm doing here on the channel, I hope to have you back here for the next video.